I'm Angela Lamont and I'm pleased to welcome you to the first of Ericsson's 5G Talks, a series where we'll cover some of the biggest topics surrounding 5G. It's fair to say there's a lot of excitement about 5G's potential to open new revenue streams for many organisations. But telcos face a lot of challenges around accelerated 5G deployment, especially the uncertainty about how they can monetize it and the constant pressure to do more for less. There's a growing need for a step change, one that can enable a full future-proofed 5G service that meets a range of evolving needs for both consumers and business. Hopefully, today's session will answer these questions with the help of expert insights from our guests, and we've got the Ericsson team on hand to answer your questions, so just fire away in the chat box. Let's start with a look at the current state of 5G. By piggybacking onto existing 4G infrastructure, known as non-standalone 5G, European telcos have been able to introduce 5G commercial services really quickly. But of course, this strategy is also a compromise. To unleash the full potential of 5G, we need to develop standalone and new radio networks. This is where the innovation can happen and new revenue streams open up. But first, let's have a look at where 5G has led us and take a closer look at where it could take us. It's not hard to see why so many are excited about the potential in 5G. So to help me explore this in more depth, I'm joined by Hans Hammer, Ericsson's Head of Radio Networks in Europe and Latin America. Welcome, Hans.
Thank you, Angela.
Now, it sounds like there are limitations to the kinds of mobile broadband services that telcos can offer to consumers. So is mobile broadband really enough to differentiate? And are we already seeing a saturation in this offering?
Thank you, Angela. I think mobile broadband services have been around for around 10 years or so. I mean, from the start of 4G, it really took off and have been a great growth engine for telcos. So mobile broadband subscription, number of subscribers has been increasing, and the data usage has been increasing, which generates new revenues for operators. What we have seen now during the last couple of years is that the revenues are flat and sometimes in Europe, in some countries, even declining. And the reason for that is that the market is getting saturated. The networks are really good, but the key thing is that it's only one type of subscription: mobile broadband, best effort data, and that is a product that all operators in all markets have. So it's really difficult to differentiate. And the 5G launches that happened from 2019 has not really changed that concept very much. It gave a boost when it comes to performance and capacity in the networks, which has been good, but now there is need for something else.
Thank you. So mobile broadband, of course, is just one small aspect of 5G. So how limiting is 5G non-standalone when we're talking about monetizing beyond the traditional offerings?
Yeah, so coming back to this one type of subscription, and every single service that is delivered over the mobile broadband network is going through one single pipe. So if you look at the services today, the usage in the networks, they are really, you can differentiate that in two distinctive segments. One we call casual video, which is typically like TikTok, YouTube, and things like that. And the other one is serious video, which is 4G streaming. That could be like Teams, you have video conferences and so on. The first category, the what we call buffered video, is more resilient to network congestion. So you can fit in a lot of capacity, a lot of subscribers in a fairly small amount of spectrum, whereas the streaming video is more sensitive to congestion. But since you only have one pipe to fit those services into, you need to dimension the network as if every user was a streaming video subscriber. That means that it's not a very effective way to run the networks. So operators need to deploy more capacity basically all the time. And since the revenues are more or less flat, it's not sustainable for the future. It's not a sustainable business.
So it sounds like we do need a step change to unleash the full potential of 5G. So what would a full 5G standalone service enable CSPs to offer? And what are some examples of the low-hanging fruit that they could start with?
Yeah, so the full 5G potential, that means low latency services and high reliability. Before that happens in the networks, or is possible in the networks, you can start with something called multi-pay. And multi-pay is when you have a smartphone with different applications that are using different connectivity or different slices. So they're paid for by, for example, the company. When you as an end user do work, you use the company connection with high reliability and good performance. And when you do your private stuff on your phone, maybe web browsing or gaming, then you pay for that yourself and you choose what kind of level of performance you would like to have. And that gives telcos an opportunity to monetize 5G. But even before that happens, it's an opportunity to differentiate the mobile broadband service. If we go back to the casual video and serious video that we talked about, if you can create two slices for those two type of services in the network, you can dimension them individually, separately, and that becomes more efficient, and suddenly you have a connection between the service revenue from those services. So the service revenue for the casual video being a bit lower, but also the production cost is much lower. So, and that is really, really important to create a good investment climate for operators.
Hans, thank you for talking with us about 5G today, but don't go away, we'll catch up with you a little bit later. Next up, let's welcome Mark McDermott, SVP of Radio Network Engineering and Development at T-Mobile US. Mark is here to tell us about his experiences and perspectives on 5G standalone and mid-band deployment. Hi Mark, thanks for joining us. Would you mind giving us a quick intro to yourself for the benefit of our audience here today?
Yeah, so my name's Mark McDermott and I'm here today to represent T-Mobile's technology team. I serve as Senior Vice President of Radio Network Engineering and Development, been with the company since 2004. Super excited to share my experience with 5G SA with the audience today.
At T-Mobile US, you've been working on some of the exciting opportunities we've been discussing so far. So what was the main reason to go for a world-first launch of 5G standalone?
Well, we had two sort of main motivations, I would say, for introducing 5G SA. And the first motivation was to be network ready so that we could start the process of exploring the full breadth of the 5G use cases and the full breadth of 5G capabilities from a performance perspective. So that was the first motivation, and that would be fairly sort of self-evident given that, you know, generationally we have to shift to 5G and prepare for that. So SA is a very key part of that. That's a strategic motivation. And then secondly, we had a very tactical motivation. We wanted to use SA to serve data in areas where we only had low band spectrum serving, where we couldn't do ENDC dual connected mode. So that ENDC mode wasn't available, but we still wanted to provide service via our low band. So, a large percentage of our 600 footprint is in fact 600 only. So we wanted to provide data services, and SA was the best way to do that.
And you mentioned use cases of 5G standalone there. What services do you think that this will enable?
Well, we certainly see, in terms of new use cases for 5G SA, we certainly see some really clear applications with mixed reality and wearables. But we also see a tremendous opportunity with industrial automation as well as enterprise.
Okay. And where do you see the most monetization potential?
In terms of value for our business as an operator, we see increasingly customers saying that of the wireless applications they operate today, there are certain classes of those applications that they now begin to see as not being viable on unlicensed or Wi-Fi based networks. They want to transition those for security reasons, for mobility in some cases, or just in terms of how they manage services end to end in a much more sophisticated manner. And that obviously represents a huge opportunity for us.
How do you secure the best possible coverage and throughput in your network for 5G standalone? And what additional value does that bring to your business?
Yeah, I'll do my best to answer your question there. And starting with the coverage and availability. So at T-Mobile US today, we have standalone capability across 100% of all spectrum bands and all of our core network. So it's a capability it's completely ubiquitous today. And we have support in many smartphones today and devices. So we feel like the capability is well deployed and fully supportive of any use case we want to throw at it. In terms of nearer term value to the business, when we engage with customers, what we typically find is the dialogue may start around 5G because 5G really has stimulated a very different and rich set of conversations with partners in a way that maybe 4G really hadn't in the early days of 4G. So the conversation starts with open dialogues about the art of the possible, but it quickly converges to real business problems that our customers have. And what we typically find is that some of those can be solved adequately with existing devices economically. Some are 4G, some are 5G, but the use case can be solved quickly and easily. And that's short-term, near-term value for us and our customers. And there's a class of problems sometimes that comes up that really does require the very most advanced forms of technology. I'll give you one example. We're very aware that manufacturers of automobiles, when they're producing their vehicles, have to update the infotainment systems in vehicles. And we all know those have become very complex and capable. But the systems that are installed in the production line typically have a version that's several versions old, and they have to make a decision at some point during manufacturing to do the flash upgrade. And today they have to jack in using a hard wire, and it takes way too long to complete, and it slows the production down. So in the future, the use case that they want to be able to do that wirelessly using gigabit speeds and 5G. So that's just a huge opportunity right underneath our nose. Very well suited to the spectrum assets we have at T-Mobile. Just a great use case for 5G and industrial automation, and adds real value to the customer's operation.
So what challenges have you experienced so far, if any?
Well, at T-Mobile US, we've been working very avidly on this, and we've been working at a furious pace. So the complexity in 5G is real. It was there in 4G. So making sure our suppliers are testing all capabilities on all spectrum bands is crucial. And I would say some of the early headwinds were around some of the, let's say, focus that was created around certain spectrum bands, but not all spectrum bands. So it's very important to think of making sure that services work on all spectrum bands ultimately. And that's something that we solved at T-Mobile in our rollout, at least.
And finally, what advice do you have for operators considering 5G standalone?
Yeah, maybe just to offer a couple of insights. I think, for operators who are considering SA mode who are curious. I'd encourage everybody to start early. Engage the device vendors proactively, and think about building and maturing the capability across the network and the device ecosystem in concert, and make sure that the use cases that you're interested in pursuing are really well communicated in advance, because technology for the sake of it can be a little bit sort of lacking focus. But once you talk about real use cases, typically partners and suppliers get very, very interested quickly because they can see the business opportunity.
Fantastic. Thanks again for joining us today, Mark. Bye for now. Well, it's great to hear what T-Mobile US are doing to release the potential of 5G. Hans, what did you make of that?
No, it's great to hear from T-Mobile US. I mean, the first in the world to launch 5G SA. I think what is interesting to see that is also relevant for Europe is that they use the lowest band available is 600 megahertz in the US to deploy 5G in the wide area. And then they combine that with the TDD midband for the capacity that is needed. So I think that is really, really excellent strategy, and we should do the same here in Europe. The second point I wanted to make is the emphasis on the ecosystem, device ecosystem, because 5G SA will also need 5G SA enabled devices, so smartphones and other types of devices. And that is really something that we as an industry need to make sure that those devices are there when we launch the service, of course.
Right, and now this is the part where everyone gets excited. What will a fully deployed 5G standalone network enable? And let's try and keep our feet on the ground here. In fact, why don't we start by just exploring some of the key principles that telcos will need to consider when building a 5G standalone network from the ground up. So Hans, what would you advise?
Okay, so there are three very important principles. First, you need to have network slicing. That is the enabler of monetization, because that can create the slices with different performance in the network. Secondly, you need to have good coverage. With non-standalone, you relied on 4G for the coverage. Now you need to have NR 5G new radio on the lowest possible spectrum. And that's usually 700 megahertz, could be 900 or 800 as well. So that provides the coverage, making sure that when you are in a 5G standalone area, you will always have the service on standalone and never fall down to 4G. That is a really important principle. Then the third is that you need to have a capacity layer as well, which means that you need to have a TDD midband. So more spectrum, good coverage, that provides a layer for network slicing.
And a lot of people are curious about network slicing because it seems it could offer many verticals the bespoke solutions that run off the back of a full 5G standalone infrastructure. So can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, so when you start to build network slicing, then I think the biggest change with going from non-standalone to standalone is to build that first or maybe one or two slices, because that's all new. And that it needs to be connected from the service that you offer to the network and how you operate those network slices. So that is all new, and that's really a big step. It's a bigger step between non-standalone and standalone than what it was between 4G and non-standalone, so the first step of 5G. But when you have that in place, then you can start to build slices in parts of the network for verticals, for like a dedicated network. You as a telco can provide dedicated network capabilities to companies or enterprises in different locations, and you can provide slices across the network as well. So that means that you get service continuity when you move around those new use cases also across the network. So that is like really the platform for innovation.
Hans, thank you for your time and for those insights. I mean, it seems that network slicing could be a great way for telcos to innovate and start monetizing their 5G offering. So let's go over to Christian Janssen now for a look at how dynamic slice selection can help telcos open more opportunities for innovation and monetization. And after that, we'll return to the studio and answer some of the questions we've received from you.
Here we answer the question everybody has about 5G, how to earn new money. And the answer is multi-pay with slicing. Let me exemplify what this is with the template of how the first 5G networks can look like. We have here three areas, an industrial area, mixed area, and the residential area with different types of radio partitions. Together with core network functionality, these radio network partitions become network slices and can also have isolation, edge compute, and other types of benefits. It's possible to create a lot of use cases on only these few partitions. So let me exemplify that with 4 use cases that are distinct and maybe will not be exactly the use cases that will be the first or the biggest ones, but they're quite representative for the technology that is underlying all this. Mira, she's an office employee like ourselves, and she has a Android 12 phone, the latest Pixel phone from Google in this example. That is a managed device, so she has a personal side and a work side. The data on the personal side we put into slice number 1. In this example, an EMB economy slice. The data on the work side we put into subscription number 2, which can be on, for example, a premium slice. The benefit for the CSP here is to be able to send 2 invoices from the same phone. The technical background of this is called URSP. That is a functionality inside Android 12, which is programmed from the policy controller of the operator, and it essentially maps the applications to the slices. So Mira or her employer doesn't need to care about it. They only know that this data goes on 2 different subscriptions. The second example is Jenny, and she's one of those persons who are always looking for the cheapest subscription. So she has bought an EMBB economy, but because she's also a gamer, sometimes she wants to have something better without having to pay for premium all the time. So the operator can offer a boost subscription where she has economy and, for example, 10 boost hours per month. Then she can download an app like this from the operator. This is the dynamic end user boost functionality from Ericsson, where she can select, for example, premium, 60 minutes, and then boost, and then for 1 hour her phone goes up to the premium subscription, and then 1 hour later it goes down. The third example is Carla. She's a teacher who cares about her students being able to connect from home. So her school has bought a bulk subscription, and then Carla registers the phone numbers of the parents, and whenever those phones connect to the school intranet, the operator invoices the school rather than the students. So it's a good way for example, politicians or the local municipality to be able to subsidize school, just the school subscriptions and not other things the kids could be doing with the phones. The last example is Barry. He's an app developer that is developing a crane app for another company. So he will buy developer versions of these subscriptions that it develops on, and when the crane app is ready, he will ship it to the crane operator. And the crane operator will then have to buy the production versions of those subscriptions. So we've gone through 4 examples of how dynamic network slice selection. It's available now. Please contact my colleagues to learn more about this and how you can deploy it in your network.
There are some really thought-provoking ideas there, and it's inspired many of you to send in your questions, which is brilliant. But before we answer those, let's have a quick refresher of the key points we've covered today. Hans, why do you think organizations should invest in 5G right now? And how can they realize the value of it?
Yeah, so I mean, the value of 5G is really here and now. And we have seen industries and society in general digitizing all the processes since many, many years back, and it's well underway. and the pandemic has accelerated that. So now is the time for telcos to step up and take part of that value chain. But what needs to be done is to move into standalone. With network slicing and partitioning of the network, you can provide those different services towards different types of customers and different types of use cases. So moving into standalone and 5G with network slicing, that is really going to make 5G take off also from a revenue potential point of view.
Now, I know that many of you are itching to ask questions about today's presentation. The Ericsson team is here to receive them, so just pop your question in the chat window and they'll be here for 30 minutes after the end of the show, so please keep your questions coming. I'd like to thank our guests today, Hans Hammer, Mark McDermott, Christian Janssen, and of course you for joining us. I hope we've given you plenty to think about, that we've inspired you to find new opportunities using 5G. I'll see you next time.